Hi, everyone. Welcome to Terpenes and Testing, the podcast. This broadcast is brought to you by Mace Media Group and Terpenes and Testing Magazine, the industry's first publication dedicated to cannabis science. I'm Jason Lupoi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Terpenes and Testing Magazine, and I'll be your host as we navigate across the landscape of cannabis and psychedelics science. The laws surrounding cannabis just don't make sense. We've talked about it in several of these podcast episodes already, and we'll continue to beat that drum until something changes. A very old plant has been painted as evil, and those who peddle it in league with the devil. We've been indoctrinated with the horror stories regarding how the plant is terrible to us for a very long time. And yet things like alcohol, caffeine, sugar, and nicotine, all legal substances, are highly addictive and don't really bestow much medicinal output. None of those substances can help someone, for example, suffering from PTSD or depression, at least that I'm aware of. Many of our nation's veterans and veterans of other countries across the globe have endured traumas, witnessed horrific events, and seen combat. According to the U.S. Department of Foreign Affairs, nearly 30% of Vietnam War veterans have been diagnosed with PTSD. And who really knows how accurate that number is? It's also been reported that 22 veterans take their lives every day. And that is stunning, wouldn't you say, and heartbreaking. So if a plant can help someone who has witnessed hell to find happiness, peace, or maybe just forget some of what they've seen, how can our government deny them that, and even more criminal, take benefits from them that their very service to their country earned them? So for this episode, I wanted to speak with Aaron Augustis. I did an interview with Aaron back in 2019 that enlightened me to the insider's view of veterans and cannabis. Aaron was deployed to Mosul, Iraq from April to November in 2003. The invasion began on March 20th of 2003, and Aaron crossed the border of Kuwait into Iraq on Easter, then he experienced the guerrilla warfare of improvised explosive devices, mortar rounds, and indirect fire of rockets being fired into their camps. Aaron did not connect with the Veterans Health Administration until 8 years after he was discharged from the military. He, like many other veterans he has met, wanted little or nothing to do with the VA or the Department of Defense after he got out. And Aaron eventually met with his local Veterans Service officer who encouraged him to get enrolled into the Veterans Health Administration. And from there, Aaron found many of their services to be extremely beneficial and received the healthcare benefits he earned through serving his country. Aaron currently advocates for the ability of his fellow veterans to have the freedom to find inner tranquility through the use of cannabis, a freedom that many of the rest of us already have. Aaron founded Veterans Cannabis Group, an organization that advocates for the medicinal use of cannabis for combat-related PTSD, and that also provides networking, educational support group, and employment opportunities to veterans looking for alternative medicines. Veterans Cannabis Group also offers informational support and collaborates with other veteran advocacy groups, and they even funnel donated cannabis to veterans. So Aaron, welcome to the podcast. It's great to speak with you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So, the interview that I did with you really meant a lot to me because I have, Vietnam War veterans in my family who have seen, the hell of that war. And I've spent time at car cruises, for example, at a local American Legion with them. And I've listened to their stories about the apocalyptic war zones that they found themselves in, kids right out of high school, never having a chance to have that youthful abandon that so many of us has had. And in the interview, you said at 18, you can get issued a grenade launcher with orders to kill, but you can't drink a beer until you're 21. A rocket launcher is okay, but that joint is dangerous for me. And I was wondering if you could talk about the daily life of a soldier in a combat zone like you were in, and also, how you've seen cannabis help veterans who have lived through those kinds of experiences.
Yeah. The daily life in a combat zone is always stressful, always on high alert, never knowing what's going on, always needing to be ready to move quickly or get out of the area or respond to contact. It's a very high stressful situation. At that point, you have live ammunitions and a real enemy. So it's no longer training. Everything's on the line, including your life. And most of us are young. I was 22 years old when I was over there. And you really are still a child when it comes to lifespan of our normal life. So you're in a very highly anxious, highly stressful situation. At a certain point, you have to kind of deal with that level of intensity to be able to operate on a daily basis and not get burnt out, so to speak. So it really gets ingrained into your system, into your you're in the fight or flight mode for a long period of time. Our brains are not fully developed until we're 25 years old. So as a 22-year-old living in a fight or flight situation for 7 months, my neuron pathways were developing differently. And I was still, my brain was still developing and growing. But it's hardwired differently than my counterpart, let's say, that was going to college, where he wasn't in a stressful environment and he wasn't in that fight or flight mode constantly every day for an extended period of time. So it has these everlasting effects where you're hardwired, you're looking for exit strategies or exit routes, maybe, at a restaurant or driving down the road, or certain things can trigger you if, depending on what happened to you, like IEDs, roadside bombs, mortar rounds coming into your camp, direct fire, indirect fire, dealing with injured personnel, dealing with explosions, dealing with large amounts of explosives, all of that compounded, and not to mention the emotional fact of being away from your family. You don't know realistically if you will make it back. And as a combat engineer, which was my job, we dealt with explosives on a daily basis. We had to destroy captured munitions. We worked with EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, blowing up those munitions and making sure that we were destroying them correctly and entirely. So it just becomes almost a normal mode or level of intensity that you're dealing with, because you're over there for, not just days and weeks, but months. Sometimes guys are there for a year and a half. They come back and they go back. So it really gets ingrained into your way of living. So imagine listening to the speaker or the stereo at full dial tilt all the way to the right, and you're doing that every day, all day. That's the level of intensity that you're experiencing in the war zone. Then you come back to the United States and everyone's on like level 10 and you're still on a level 1000. You have to try to dial yourself down to fit in with the normal, vibe of everybody back here, but you're not. You're still amped. You're still just in that, full tilt to the right dial knob mode. So it takes a long time to decompress from that. It takes a long time to digest it. It takes a long time to move on from it. And in some cases, it's never fully moved on. You're going to be triggered with different things. Perhaps, I know the Ukraine war, watching the clips from the soldiers over there, just relating to those guys on the ground, as it was a trigger for me when it first started a couple months ago, just watching it, because I can relate, and just feeling the emotions of what those guys are going through. The anger the being scared, being just stressed out of your mind, you know. And for me, you mentioned cannabis and Veterans Cannabis Group. I started it because I found that I was using cannabis a lot daily when I first got back in December '03, and my first year back as a civilian, 2004, and the cannabis would help calm me down and get me out of my head, which I think is counterintuitive to a lot of people who think, oh, you're getting high, meaning getting high, you're out of your normal state of mind or not thinking right or something. But in this case, it would actually calm me down and bring me back to the present reality of where I was back in California, not in danger. And I was able to just be relaxed. It helped me relax more. And it kind of, I think over time too, the more you're smoking it or using it, that it helps your body and your maybe your memory, or helps you release and kind of forget some of these experiences,
right?
Or release some of these experiences from your body, you know, over time. Because a lot of trauma stays within our body as energy, and we can be, or knots in your stomach or wherever in your shoulders, you carry it, you know, people carry the stress in different ways. So it helps, you know, mentally, helps physically, with sleeping as well. So there's a lot to be said when it comes to what is it like to be in war zone? What is it like to have that experience? And what does cannabis do to help you through that experience? Which is what our mission is for the Veterans Cannabis Group, is advocating the medicinal use of cannabis for combat-related PTSD and the other service-connected disabilities out there. For my experience, the combat-related PTSD is what I stress and advocate. So, yeah, I did not connect with the VA till 8 years after I'd gotten out of the military, for reasons what you described. You know, you want to kind of move on. You don't want to be associated with the Department of Defense, the VA. And it's not mandatory, the briefings to get enrolled in the VA. They're doing a better job of that now, from what I've heard and talked to recent veterans that have gotten out of the service. But the VA has a lot of great services, counseling, you know, full medical and dental and GI Bill, of course, all these different things that the VA can provide, monetary compensation. The one thing that they're lacking, though, is the use of medicinal cannabis, and the ability to prescribe it, and the ability to talk about it and educate us, the veterans, about it, because it's a Schedule I classified drug.
Right.
And
I was curious.
The VA.
Oh, go ahead.
The VA employees, they're federal employees. So when I talk to a counselor at the VA, he's a counselor, he's a psychologist, a doctor, but he's a federal employee. So no matter what he thinks, if he agrees with it or disagrees, he can't advise me on it, can't educate me on it, can't prescribe it to me, can't write me a doctor's note, none of that. So we really don't have, you know, even though the VA has all these resources, they can't help us with this. So we have to do it ourselves. We have to do it on the private sector, and we have to do it within our own community. And for us, for the Veterans Cannabis Group, that's veterans talking to other veterans. We're telling our stories firsthand experience of going to wars or getting your leg blown off, or even sexual trauma in the service. There's so many different things, and we're like providing this information and these experiences, but we're also providing a solution, not to treat it or fix your everything. It's one of the tools to help with the symptoms. So I don't just advocate, hey, yeah, just go ahead and smoke pot every single day from the moment you get up, and your problems will be solved. No, it's a tool. It's also a drug. It has mind altering effects. You need to have, in order for what we want to advocate is well-being and whole balanced life. So get a job, the having something to do, exercise, eating right, counseling, and yeah, cannabis. There's the VA can only use what they're allowed to, which is any FDA approved medications when it comes to medications. And so those include opioids, SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are like antidepressants. And all of those are super, super powerful drugs that affect your brain big time and have biochemical changes that happen with your brain over time of using them. And it takes a few weeks or so for those drugs to kick in, and it also takes a few weeks to get off of them. So, but they're synthetic. They're not. They have. They're a tool, and they do have their place, but there's also this, natural plant cannabis that doesn't have these major side effects that some of these drugs have that are FDA approved. So to us, the end game, I think, would be to have the VA be able to talk about it, prescribe it, educate us about it, and then to have the veterans be able to go to the VA to go get our medicinal cannabis. Once that happens, then there's no real reason for all these veteran nonprofit advocacy groups to get out there, other than to just continue to tell our stories and help other veterans learn about it. But really, the VA is our medical system. They're responsible for us for the rest of our lives. So we have this, for combat-related PTSD, it's something that happened while I was in service. I wouldn't have had it if I didn't join the military. So the funny, the thing is like, hey, when we were in the service, you relied on us for intelligence, for information. You gave us missions. We executed them. We gave you feedback on where the enemy was or whatever the situation was, right? So now we have another enemy, and it's not a person. It's PTSD. It's a high suicide rate. It's an opioid epidemic. All these things that are side effects of coming home from the war and then trying to be treated with these medications that are approved by the FDA that just aren't working all the time. And so that's a problem. There's another problem going on, and what we're saying, hey, as civilians now, veterans, we have identified a solution. We have intelligence for you from the ground, boots on the ground experience. We're trying to report it up the chain of command, so we can, execute and get this mission done, which would be to help veterans and save lives and reduce the suicide rate and all of those things. So it's more like, hey, we worked for the government before. We want to work with you again. We're not against the government. We're just saying that we think that we're providing this intelligence, and you guys listened to us before, why not listen to us again now? And if the VA medical system is there to help veterans and save lives of veterans, then
Right.
they should really listen to us as the people that they're trying to help.
Could you talk a little bit about Operation EVAC and how that organization tries to help educate veterans on, what the plant is and what it's not, especially given that some stigmas may still exist and, a veteran coming out of the military may find benefit in the plant, but they might also associate it with the Schedule 1 status and all the propaganda that we've heard for so long.
So yeah, Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis, is through another friend, colleague, veteran, Ryan Miller. And he does these meetings throughout the Bay Area in Northern California in a group type of format, circular type of situation where you're sitting down in a group, and he kind of curates the meeting, and everybody talks about their experiences. He might have some questions to provoke conversation, but it's, again, more of along the lines of veterans telling their story and communicating with each other what works and what doesn't work and how cannabis is working. So I highly recommend anyone that's within reach of his meetings, if you're interested, to go, and you can find him online. Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis, Ryan Miller, and he's doing a lot of good work.
Yeah.
So he's just another fellow veteran that's doing the good work, and we support that. Hey, if you're a legislator out there and you're curious about cannabis, go to one of these meetings and listen to the veterans. Because the other important thing to remember is that we're talking about veterans, military veterans, people that have had security clearances, maybe even helicopter pilots, airplane pilots, special forces, rangers, whatever, Army, infantry, combat engineers, Air Force, all of the branches where we all had highly responsible jobs with high capability of lots of weapons and the ability to take a lot of lives and do a lot of damage on the battlefield. And so we're not talking about people that have no direction or just trying to get high, or it's a different culture than, I guess, what you can look at. Oh, maybe the hippies, or homeless people only do drugs and cannabis. So it's like, hey, look, we're normal operating people in society, and we're using cannabis just like any other drug out there. Like people use prescribed medications, Vicodin, Valium, things like that for medicinal uses, and it's just that what I'm trying to say is that we're trying to legitimatize the use of medicinal cannabis. For one, we're United States military veterans, so we're not just any segment of the population, right? We're people that have served, like I said, people who have had different types of security clearances, different types of jobs with highly stressful and responsible positions, with huge amounts of firepower behind it. So it's not like we're just coming off the street saying that we want to smoke cannabis to get high.
Right.
That's my point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about before was cost of cannabis, and that a lot of veterans are on fixed incomes and may not be able to afford the cost of seeking out a better quality of life, or something that allows you to forget or relax or sleep. When you look at what the cost of a bottle of pills can be. It might be $10 and last you 3 months. And in Pennsylvania right now, they've passed legislation, or it's moved forward, to allow medical cannabis patients to use their healthcare insurance. And I don't know what that's going to look like from an insurance cost perspective, but the fact remains that the cost of cannabis is preclusive for a lot of people right now. And I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your group has tried to lessen that financial burden.
Well, that's one of the negative aspects of Proposition 64, adult legalization in California. Unfortunately, the legislation imposed too many taxes. They just got rid of the cultivation tax in July of this year. So it made prices extremely high. It took away profit margins for operators. And, the taxes are 30-40% on top of the already high price. You factor in people have to get it tested, then it has to be distributed. Distributor has to take their percentage, then the retailer goes, the retailer takes their percentage. So that's an unfortunate thing that has happened since legalization, and an over-regulation or over-taxation of it in California. Good. I'm glad that they've removed the cultivation tax. That's great. That will help. Another thing that happened was SB 34, Senate Bill 34, where the donation of cannabis can happen without the major taxation component if it's going to, medicinal for donation purposes. So we've helped organize SB 34 drops, we call them, right? Where veterans can go to a dispensary and show their ID cards and receive some of the donated cannabis. That's happened. And there's also been just people donating cannabis that we helped get it to the hands of veterans through, let's call it the traditional markets, right? Where hey, or more of the Prop 215, where it's like, all right, so I want to get this, I have, a couple pounds I want to donate to veterans. Can you guys help me do that?
Yeah,
absolutely, sure. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's not waste time through some of these channels that have been set up, and let's just get the job done.
Yeah, that's great. I was curious. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I was curious if we could talk a little bit about. There's been a bunch of recent papers on veterans and PTSD and psychedelics, and there are rumors that I just read something about how the Biden administration is preparing a task force for when psychedelics like psilocybin are legalized, and some folks are saying this is all supposed to happen within the next 2 years. These molecules have been said to really increase one's well-being at a very rapid pace. And given the suicide rate that I talked about, the 22 a day, I was curious if you thought that cannabis worked quickly enough for folks when it might be a matter of life and death, and what your thoughts are on the prospect of psychedelics being available for things like PTSD, depression, things like that.
I think that you have to be really careful when you're talking about any of these drugs, because if you don't have experience with them, you could have a bad, quote, trip, right? And I've taken psilocybin mushrooms. They're great, they're good healing, but they also are very intense, and they last a long time depending on how much you take, and then I think going in even harder, like LSD, that's a whole nother level. Very strong, very powerful, drugs. I don't like doing that. I have tried it. It's very intense. And like I said, you have to have a strong mind or be in a safe situation. So when you're starting to talk, mushrooms, if you're doing like micro doses and, doing it maybe with people that have done it before, or you're in a safe environment, you're in nature, you just kind of, you can't just go ahead and say, I want to take some mushrooms today and then go to work. It's not going to work for you. So I recommend knowing what you're taking, being with people that have taken them before. I just think that you got to be very careful with it. I think they're great, and in a lot of aspects, they're natural mushrooms, and they have a lot of healing properties. And microdosing is a great thing to look at, as opposed to just dosing yourself with a large amount. Maybe microdosing over a period of time. So I think that you can also do things without drugs, like light, sound, and vibration therapy. One of our veteran board members for the Veterans Cannabis Group, Jonathan Shia, down in Santa Monica, from the Reality Center, has been treating PTSD veterans and EMT first responders through light, sound, and vibration therapy, which requires no drugs. And I've done it before, and it's amazing. So there's all these different things out there. That's why I think, well balanced, do them in doses, see what works for you, do them with other people that can help supervise you if you don't have experience, because you want to be safe. You don't want to have a negative interaction when it's something that's supposed to help you,
Right.
I want to mention, so Veterans Cannabis Group is our nonprofit, veteranscannabisgroup.com. Jeremy Freitas, one of our board members as well, Air Force veteran, he started a farm called Patriot Valley Farms up in Cloverdale. And we've been able to have veterans go up there, mess around with the plant, get closer to it, see what it's like to farm. That's also a very therapeutic way to get involved with the industry, with the plant, that is, right?
Right.
You don't have to always smoke it all the time, getting outside and getting that exposure to the sunshine and watering and getting your hands in the soil, and all the cannabis he is growing there supplies the brand we started called Brothers Mark, which is a veteran owned and operated cannabis brand that supports hiring veterans, which we talked about as part of the holistic approach, getting veterans jobs, trying to provide veterans with affordable medicine, quality and affordable. And so all those things are being incorporated through Patriot Valley Farms in Cloverdale, supplying cannabis to Brothers Mark, then in return, supporting the nonprofit advocacy work. So we're trying to create, kind of an ecosystem there, a circular way to support all aspects of veterans and cannabis.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Aaron. And I think we're pretty much out of time here. I want to thank you for being our guest today, for your service.
Appreciate it.
And for being such a strong shoulder for veterans in need of cannabis. I mean, most of us can't even fathom what you and your fellow veterans may have gone through. And so I think it's got to be a great comfort for veterans interested in pursuing cannabis to have resources like you mentioned, Veterans Cannabis Group, Brothers Mark, and Operation EVAC, things like that.
Yeah. Thank you for having us on. Appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time on Terpenes and Testing, the podcast. Until then, please come visit us at www.terpenesandtesting.com or on one of our social media platforms. Cheers.